thanks for doing this and inviting us in and inviting me in. This was actually my idea from the first collaboration between Hannah and Bree, which is at Roy G. Biv. Probably most of you, though not all of you, know that. And I want to say that was in March or so. February, about 6-7 months ago. When I saw that they were showing together, I didn't know that it was going to be an attempt at a kind of collaboration. And so when I walked in, I was a little bit surprised. I mean, it was pretty clear who was doing what. And I was delighted that Bree and Hannah decided to continue and work down here at the Urban Art Space, which is, for those of you who don't know, Roy G. Biv Gallery, considerably larger and more challenging, I think. Because I think for an artist, anytime the space gets larger, the scale gets larger, and this is a complex space as well, the sort of, the work becomes, the literal work becomes more complicated because you have to scale up. I think what I've been really interested in this particular exhibition is seeing where you worked together and where you stayed separate. So this is one of my first questions, is that as I noticed when I walk in, and I think it's a misperception. My initial misperception was, you know, Hannah on this side, and kind of Bree on this side, and Hannah on that wall, and Bree on that wall. And I think to some degree that's true, but I know within here, these things I call settees, which are like furniture, which I think of as a response also to the architecture and to the scale issue. And so if you could talk about that decision, and then there's a shift as you go around this side. Certainly it feels like, and I avoided a walkthrough with these two a couple days ago because I didn't want to hear what they had to say. But it seems pretty apparent the works on this side are clearly both and. You're both working on those, although, and again, I'm not quite sure about this, it seems like they're divided side by side. You know, there's an in space that both of you like permeate the border, but there's one side and another side. And then this room here, the keyhole room, is more difficult for me to know. I mean, I know the rug is Bree's. The keyhole is a symbol that I'm familiar with in Hannah's work. And what I wanted to say about these settees that I forgot is, I guess these are birds with tongues, which I know from Hannah's painting, but I didn't recognize them as that at first. So I thought, why don't you guys talk about it? First, the decision. It was an observation, but it was about deciding to this space is kind of divided like this, and then the space is further divided, and this thing about dividing the space, dividing tasks, and then those places where they are not divided, where they come together as a means of working together and thinking together, and yet also negotiating your own territories, whether they're conceptual or material or whatever.
Yeah, I think last time at Roy G. Biv, we kind of didn't really have the opportunity to make work together, and so we kind of just brought all of our works into one space and dealt with them in space. As in here, I think we really approached the show as like a 3-person exhibition. So there's moments where Hannah could do like things on her own and I could do things on my own, and then those moments where we come together to make works. And I think the ones in the window well behind us were really like the start and the catalyst for everything else that we worked together on. All the like drawings that we produced for those then like started to stretch out that space and become other elements. And so like through the process of drawing the shapes for the exterior forms of those, we like found the keyhole in Hannah's drawings and then started to work on that space. And then I had just really wanted to exploit this weird space behind us and really kind of like grabbed onto this one drawing from the Roy show that Hannah did with the two birds. And so that's how they kind of became this like growing out of these two birds in space, but also kind of blurring that line of, you know, the discovery, you just realizing they're two birds or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that in the beginning when we started working together too, we were not ready to really work together, and so when we were in Roy it became more so about like this kind of response to what's in front of us, and more so drawing, I think, intuitively, and trying to make connections quite literally with like painting to object, and like even just like forms extending off of the painting, so it became more of a collage. And I think here it was different too, as Michael was talking about with the architecture. It's a bigger space, and I think we were excited to have moments where things could breathe in a different way and maybe speak to each other from across the room, which becomes less about like seeing a composition, I think, which was more the Roy show, and like more so like the body being in it, and experiencing scale in different ways. And I think it did start with like, just like wanting, me kind of saying like we should build something. And then as Brie was saying, like it kind of branched out from there and figuring out like what kind of things do we want to build, and like what kind of formal language go within those things.
I heard you talk about gendered spaces and gendered objects. So I'm thinking of, this, passage through in and out of space. And I'm just curious, like how and where you perceive that. And so walking into this space, and with that in mind, where these images and where these objects and where these things, I think of them a little less as abstractions, as a tension between abstraction and image, as between image and thing. And then maybe later we can talk about scale. But you want to maybe respond to what I just said?
I'll start. So I think the keyhole, like as we were saying before, the keyholes and the birds were pulled from a drawing I made that was in the Roy show, specifically with like two birds that were mirrored, which was titled Crying Birds by the Keyhole. And the scale of the birds were really large, and they're silhouetted, and the keyholes were almost windows or openings into a landscape. And so it's kind of reversing the relationship between where you think this like image or like actual thing should be. And I think that with the keyholes, we're also interested in that as well, of like what does scale do to the keyhole? Like what happens when a body can actually move through the keyhole, and how is it in relationship to it? So it's both, like you can look into a body, thinking about like the body's composition again, but it's also activating your own body, so it breaks that barrier a little bit more. So it is kind of this, I think it is like a loaded symbol, but it also, I think, can read as a lot of different things as well. Like it can move, it's maybe not, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it is kind of loaded as the keyhole, but I think it can fluctuate between other forms and associations too.
For you, Brie, I wonder about this scale issue, as a person who partly works in glass.
Yeah, I think like one of the things I was challenging myself with in this show with the glass is how to like create scale in different ways, which is maybe always a problem with my practice. Because the glass is so related to the scale of my body and my capabilities, I kind of have thought about how to expand things in different ways. And so like the stretch is an expansion of space, but the glass does become a little bit more utilitarian or design, but you're also still like, I don't know what you would actually use that for. As in here with the birds, I think that the glass is doing something differently when it's like kind of amongst its own atmosphere, and because it's not grounded and it's not directly attached to, like it kind of has a sensibility that it could move when you're not looking at it, or it could, go somewhere else.
I'll just say one thing for me is those two red handles, like one of the things that's a shift in scale for me, how they work that way is they actually imply to me two bodies, and they imply two bodies, and pulling, one on each end, and pulling with two hands. And so the space between those two bodies becomes infinitely, it would seem, stretchable. And that's a shift of scale because they're in relation to each other and in relation to a third thing. Whereas here, the relation they have to this thing doesn't have the same dynamic as that. And so it's just a curious, whereas I think in painting, like in your paintings, Hannah, there's lots of shifts in scale going on at one time, and that's because, of course, two-dimensional, it's the playground of two-dimensional imagery, right, and figuration to some extent. And maybe then we could switch the conversation over to this issue of abstraction and what it means and what it is. But to do that, I'm wondering if we can go over to the next room, because I'm really fascinated by all the negotiation that seems to be going on between you in a very intense way. I want to know what were the fights about.
I don't think there are any fights in that space.
Yeah, I think that space is pretty tame
you
as far
perfectly
as the fights
agree.
go.
Well, let's go see how agreeable they really are. The reason I was asking all these questions about process is I think one, collaboration actually is really hard, and it's curious to me that you would decide to do it. And I think the process of it and how that works out is really important. Like to me, like being clear about those processes, because I think oftentimes there's an assumption that it's not a dialogue. That it's just because when we're working by ourselves, of course it's a monologue. It's a dialogue between your interior self and that shitty thing you just made that you thought was going to be better, right? And when it's a show, the pressure is even bigger. Right, and so to go through that process, I think is both courageous, and I'm interested that many people are interested in collaboration right now, and there's a lot of artists doing it. So it's not, but it's different than mostly how we're trained. For
I
those
think
of us
for us, or for myself, the kind of most interesting part about collaborating with Hannah is that we both have really natural different tendencies when it comes to like thinking about space and composition and the work, but what's really nice is that it's also kind of challenging, and it makes me think about why my tendencies are the way they are, or why I want to put something somewhere that I want to put it.
Yeah.
And it's also pretty great to just have someone else to go, yes, I like that. Like you're like working on it, you're like, yeah, keep doing that. Or like you draw out a form and Hannah's like, ooh, what if we did this? Like it's kind of nice to have that back and forth, not just with yourself all the time, And I think when I think about going into the studio, I think about days that'll be easy days and days that'll be hard days. And days that are easy days are days where I don't have to make any decisions and I just go through the motions of making.
Yeah.
And then there's hard days where I have to make decisions. But in collaborating, the hard days are only half hard because Hannah makes half the decisions.
Yeah.
Or makes me think about my decision. Like sometimes you need the person to be like, Michael, do you want chocolate ice cream or strawberry ice cream? And you go, ooh, not strawberry. Don't even mention strawberry right now. So it's nice to have that person in the studio too, to kind of remind yourself of the things you like and don't like in a really quick way.
I'll remember that. I'll remember that, the advantage of working collaboratively is no matter how bad the day is, it's only half bad.
Yeah, it's only half bad.
Decisions that we can't budge on, and the way that we, I can't necessarily come into the glass shop and be standing over Brie, that's a crazy move that you just did, no, stop it, there's no way I would do that. So it's, I think, a respect out of to Brie of I don't make those decisions in glass, the same way, like with the paintings, like initially I was wanting them to be a little bit more structured, like the birds, like you have a form and then you execute it and it becomes more a part of the object. And again, it felt like I was starting to, like I wasn't necessarily, I was like losing a little bit of my voice in it too. So I think that I was like, okay, I think I have to make the painting like in response to the shape what's in, like that's in front of me, more so than feeling like I'm fabricating an idea. And for me, that's kind of how that separation happened with these objects.
It's interesting to think about the two sides as separate, because I haven't thought about them as being that separate in a long time. And while like I didn't have any control over the painting process, I think that I still have like a kinship towards it. And so while they are kind of two things in two different views, I think, yeah, it's interesting.
I think there is a question of meaning for both of you. And again, you're collaborating, right? And so, you know, what you think your work might mean individually might be something quite different from when you come together and you're bringing different sensibilities and something is happening. Because I often think of meaning, the problematic of meaning for an artist is it's something we don't actually control. You know, we may think we mean one thing, but that doesn't necessarily, the thing itself doesn't necessarily follow our directions. So if you could talk about those in this space.
Yeah, I think for me with the collaboration, you know, we start with maybe a couple of questions that we were both thinking about in terms of architecture, like how, and like I think initially just like how to challenge the architecture a little bit more. And Bree was bringing up, I think some, like a little bit of more background knowledge into it about like specifically how people, or how historically architecture has been gendered. And like how, and then I think that brought about questions for both of us of like how, like what does that even mean? And like, do we believe that? Like, is a column masculine or is like an opening feminine? And like, why do we have to name those things? And I think that is like how we started building out those shaped surfaces a little bit more and like embodying both of it somehow. And I think the meaning question for me in the collaboration is like comes out of this kind of process more so of and like the past couple of weeks too, and like doing the walkthroughs and having different people come in and talk to us about the work is like I'm understanding the work way more than I am initially with those questions. And I think, you know, transitory spaces or like this ability of like a lot of objects or spaces in this exhibition can have moments of transition or holding two different things at once, where you can look at something one way and then move a little bit and it's another thing, I think has been a thing that I've kind of pulled out of the past couple of weeks of maybe meaning for the show.
Yeah, I think initially, architecturally, I was thinking a lot about how just with our language, we label different things. So like the part of the plug that goes in the socket would be male and the socket would be female. And how like all these different things are like inherently labeled that way just in our everyday and how we talk about them and also through the architecture of the space. And so by creating kind of differences in form or like challenging that into like neutrality even is interesting to me, and how like having something that you enter into or exit from or pass through challenges kind of the inherent like structure of the column. I think this space in particular is like kind of a funny one that I go back and forth in, where I'm like, it's one, like the peeping Tom moment, so it should be feminine in some way, but then it's also this like dark green that like was the color of my brother's bedroom when we were growing up. And then there's this rug that also kind of toys with what it is and what it isn't, and its transitions as well, and also its desires to be out or falling down or to become something else.
so those are all kinds of things that I think about in this space, and I completely agree with Hannah. There's, I think, 2 different processes in art making, and one is making and then one is thinking about it after, and so I think there's always things to be revealed about the work as we have these kinds of conversations.
That's what I feel in here. You know, that you guys are working together, that these issues about, you know, and even some of the formal ones about scale and size of, you know, it's interesting, so this rug is here on the wall, but there's a rug there on the floor, which is where the rug would usually be, and then that little blue thing becomes decorative in a different way, and it's, you know, we can have a different conversation about how that object is being held by that rug, and needs that rug, needs to be on something. And so these objects always, for you, Bree, these glass objects seem to want to be on someplace besides the floor, just the floor. This concrete floor they don't like.
No, they don't like it.
And so what is liked and what's not liked, and where we choose to go and where we choose to be, and whether we choose to be upright or laying down are all.
Or we choose to
things.
come in or stay out.
Yeah, come in or stay out. Or,
Yeah, I think maybe the both and is like a really good catalyst in thinking about our collaboration together, because I often think about Hannah's tendencies towards narrative in a way that I don't have tendencies towards narrative as often, but it's kind of becomes this like both and, you know, where the keyhole can be about the peeping Tom, but it also can just be its own thing, and it can just be in space, and it can exist big and small simultaneously.
Yeah.
I was thinking about blurring the line a little bit between like fixed forms in exhibition space and the possibility of maybe breaking your own narrative that you are working within by yourself in the studio, and allowing it to open up to other narratives and new questions with someone else, and like the potential of that to kind of like let go a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I think too this is the first time for Hannah and I that we, in the act of installing work or showing work, haven't been restricted to like a one-room cube or a one-room like shape that is not a cube, you know. And so I think some of the things about like bodily experience and transitional spaces, like were a big conversation that we were having just in how to orient ourselves within this space that had lots of moments for like smaller opportunities or more succinct opportunities. And so rather than having a bunch of works in one room, we have everything kind of blown up in a way. And so it kind of gave us the freedom to like explode one singular idea into something bigger, you know. Like I think if we were in one room, like this rug would be so close to the painting, and then it would be so different than the experience we're having here at Urban Art Space. And so I think that was one of the most exciting things for us when we found out that we got to play in this space.
So, thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you, Michael.
And thanks for the show. It was really, really, really nice. And thank you, Brianna and Urban Art Space, for making this possible for all of us artists who are here in town, and giving us a place to come and giving us a place to show and talk. It's really, really great.